Hello and welcome to Foreign Affairs. Welcome to our viewers here in Ghana and across the world. We're dedicating this week to the escalating conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It has been 1 year of fighting and bloodshed, even far-reaching at the effects of the war on vulnerable economies, such as that of Ghana. This exogenous shock of the war, according to authorities, is forcing the country into austerity with the International Monetary Fund. This explains why Ghana joined 140 others at the United Nations General Assembly this week to vote overwhelmingly in favor of a resolution demanding Moscow withdraw its troops from Ukraine and end the fighting a year after Russia launched its invasion. But it is significant to note that some 32 other countries, including China and South Africa, were on the fringes, abstaining to express their open views about this escalating tension between Russia and Ukraine. About a week ago, the effects of the Russian-Ukraine war featured prominently at the Munich Security Conference, with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky himself calling for more support from the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and by extension the whole of Europe and the West to help him fight what he describes as Russia's aggression.
Now I would like to thank for the powerful support and mighty weapons. I thank Olaf and Emmanuel who are present here on this panel, and I thank all our partners present here in Munich, the United States, Britain, all the countries of the EU and all from the whole world. I am grateful to everyone who gives the sling to Ukrainian David, thanks to which Russian Goliath has already started to lose his ground. Thank you very much. Thank you. There is no alternative to our unity. Hence, there is no and should not be any alternative to completely get rid of Russian aggression, to liberate the land, to liberate people, because every city, town and village that remains under occupation means people staying in captivity. May people be the subject of compromise? No. We have to liberate Ukraine and Europe, because when the Russian weapon shoot at us, it is already pointed at our neighbors. May Europe be the subject of compromise? No. We have to liberate from Russia's aggressive potential every international institution and every sphere of the world economy, because only then there will be a chance for freedom to pass through our border further to the east.
Well, and just a week after this intervention, Germany, as we understand, is coming to the rescue. Just this week as well, we've had the German Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Svenja Scholz, led a delegation to Ghana to explore opportunities that will yield benefits for Ghana's economic recovery. Well, for more on this, I just want to bring in now Arthur Sullivan, who's with our partners DW in Berlin. And Arthur, one of the big topics of this visit is the new German supply chain law. Can you tell us how that might affect the trade between, for instance, Germany and African nations such as Ghana?
So the German supply chain due diligence law, to give it its full title, was brought in at the start of 2023, and its aim, according to the German government, is to improve the protection of human rights along global supply chains and, among other things, to prevent child labour, forced labour, and to ban substances that are hazardous to people and the environment. Now, the law is very much from the German side, so it requires German companies to manage their own supply chains in order to comply with the law. And companies in Ghana and indeed across Africa could be affected if they are part of a supply for a German company. So there is a chance that some suppliers and companies in Africa could be excluded from German supply chains if a German company felt that the law was being breached. Now, it should be noted that there are lots of German businesses who don't like this new law. They say it is unrealistic for them to manage their supply chains to such an extent, particularly when the biggest companies may have tens of thousands of suppliers. Now, from the German side, the focus so far has very much been on offering support and information to foreign companies which supply the German market. But they are emphasising one thing. keep social and environmental standards as high as possible in order to stay in line with German companies and this new law. And part of the motivation for the ministerial visit this week to West Africa is to help push back against certain unethical practices in some industries, one of them being the cocoa production industry.
And we do know that another huge topic for Germany has got to do with, for instance, migration, especially skilled labor. Germany, for instance, needs migrants. Can African countries fill that gap?
Well, the two ministers who are visiting West Africa this week represent the departments for labour and economic development. So dealing with Germany's labour shortage is maybe the biggest motivation of all behind this trip. During the visit so far, they have said that the German government is undertaking what they refer to as a paradigm shift in German migration policy. And when you look into things a little bit, they may well be right. Germany does need to attract skilled workers urgently. There's nothing new there. We've known about this for a while. It has labour shortages across multiple sectors, namely the IT sector, healthcare and construction. It also has an ageing population, so there are many skilled workers leaving the workforce each year, and that number is going up. So Germany is relaxing its immigration laws, and it says that its aim is to create the most modern law of its kind in Europe. It wants to lower hurdles to make it easier for people who want to move to Germany to do so. It says, in short, it wants safe, regular and orderly migration. Now, what role can Africa play, and specifically a country like Ghana? Well, Germany and the German government very much believes that it can play a big role. Ghana, like much of Africa, has a very young population, and in a joint declaration with the Ghanaian government this week, the ministers announced that increasing the flow of workers from Ghana to Germany was a very clear policy goal which they're now working towards, and this visit has been a big part of that.
And one of the German ministers, for instance, has spoken about a win-win situation for both African countries and Germany on the question of labour and migration. What does that really mean?
Well, this is really the biggest question perhaps when we talk about an issue like this, because it's one thing for a wealthy, very well-developed economy like Germany to say that it needs skilled workers and it needs to take them from other countries. But obviously countries like Ghana and others across Africa need these workers too, and certainly they may need them even more so in the future as their economies develop. Now, they need talented young people to stay within the domestic economy to make it flourish, and they don't necessarily want to suffer from what is a classically referred to as the brain drain problem, which has obviously afflicted economies across the world for many years at different stages. So when this minister talks about win-win, that means that this skilled migration policy really has to benefit both countries and both economies. Now, for example, there are many skilled and educated young workers in the Ghanaian labour market at present, but the problem is they don't have the opportunities that their skills demand within Ghana. They need obviously jobs in order to develop their skills further, but a well-managed labour policy with Germany, in theory, should be able to provide them with this opportunity if they can travel to Germany and work there, not only to develop their professional skills, but obviously, of course, to earn well. And the obvious goal from the Ghanaian side would be that in future that may be also able to benefit the Ghanaian economy, because if these workers can one day return to help their own domestic economy, particularly when it is more developed and when they are perhaps able to meet their own satisfaction there, then this is obviously something that they could do, come back and benefit the Ghanaian economy in the long term.
Well, Sullivan, thank you. We'll leave it here for now. Well, earlier I caught up with the German ambassador to Ghana himself, Daniel Krul, for a conversation. And we started by talking about the complex nature of international security. Ambassador Daniel Krul, thank you for talking to Joy News. Ghana's relations with Germany appears to be on the rise, with experts saying that it's being typified by the recent high-level visits that we're experiencing in the country. Even as we speak, there's a German delegation here in the country, and in the last few days, we've also seen some high-profile German officials coming to the country. We'll get into the details of all of that, but from your perspective, what is giving steam to this seemingly friendly relations between Ghana and Germany?
Well, the Ghanaian-German relation have a long history. So the steam comes from that history, first of all. Right. Secondly, my government is aware that Ghana is in a severe crisis, like many other countries in Africa, and we are very concerned, and we would like to find out how we can assist and make sure that Ghana finds a way back on to economic recovery. That is the driving force, the steam, as you call it, that drives most of the visits. Ghana has been in the focus of German industry, of German Development Corporation. Ghana is a host to many organizations who receive financing in the field of research, mostly with a regional focus, trying to establish African networks. And this is all, these are all opinion leaders who report back to Germany and so report about the current crisis in the country.
How good is it and how far can we get?
How good is what?
The relations.
I think the relations are amazingly good because on very, very different levels. It starts from family contacts between so many Ghanaians who now live in Germany and never cut their ties to their homeland Ghana, up to the very top, to the president who will travel to Germany actually today to attend the Munich Security Conference. So on all levels of society, there's an amazing, dense network among Ghana and Germany. How far we can go from here, I think there is in almost all areas there is still room for improvement.
Right.
Starting with the economic sector, I strongly believe that once West Africa and Africa gets on track with the continental free trade area, that of course will be a big boost for also relations between Germany and Ghana, because Ghana has a lot to offer as a regional hub for German industry. I'm aware that there are companies, German companies who are ready to invest. They have normally a rather long-term strategy. So they are not totally confused because of the current crisis, but they're looking on long-term developments, and they view Ghana as a very, very important pillar for the strategies.
Amazing. And let me just pick up on the president's visit to Germany. It's come at an opportune time where, of course, many African countries are reeling under the effects of two exogenous factors. You talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, we'll get into it shortly, but then top on the agenda at the Munich Security Conference is the latest, the Russian-Ukraine war. It's not just impacting Ukraine and Russia and other European countries, Germany included, but here in Africa as well, we're facing the disruptions in the supply chain as well. How is Germany and Ghana cooperating on that front to avert the economic shocks that are coming with this crisis?
Well, I think first of all, it's a huge and tremendous challenge to security in Europe. So it's the Russian unlawful attack on the Ukraine. And we are very grateful that Ghana has had a very clear stand in the Security Council on condemning this breach of international law and this attack on the international order, including the Charter of the United Nations. Now, and of course, the immediate impact is most evident in Europe, including in my country. We have a huge number of refugees from the Ukraine who now live in Germany, and we have to cope with that, with the impact on rising prices and for housing, for example. And that, of course, is a great concern. At the same time, you're aware that the energy market went totally out of control, and Germany was relying very much on gas from Russia. So we are coping with these challenges and hopefully have mastered quite important steps, but there's still a long way to go, as peace doesn't seem to be around the corner. Now, this conference in Munich, the Munich Security Conference, has a long history, which started in the times of the Cold War. So Russia was always on the agenda in this conference. There were times when we had a very cordial cooperation with Russia and also very constructive talks. Today, unfortunately, we are in a totally different setting, and we need to find out how we can convince Mr. Putin to stop this war, because he is the one who has all the means to stop it right now. And this is I think the major aim. It's a search for peace and ways to convince the Russian leadership to stop this war. This war has effects, as you rightly pointed out, not only on Europe but also in Africa,
Yes.
and sometimes very directly. Let's take the fuel prices in Ghana.
For instance,
I mean, this
yes.
is of course the most immediate effect people in the street of Ghana, in street of the capital, could feel, and so that also, of course, triggered price rise for vegetables and others. So this is an immediate effect of the terrible policy of Russia. The second dimension is the growing activities of Russian soldiers in the Wagner Group in Mali and other countries in the region, which is also of concern to Ghana. And I think this is what this visit of your president in Munich will be mostly about. It's about how we can avoid to come back to a time where we have this proxy wars and proxy conflicts that were so devastating for this continent in the 60s and 70s. So this is what we're hoping for, and that is of course also your president will meet the German head of government, Mr. Scholz, and they certainly will also try to find a way how we can help Ghana to settle its financial problems.
There's this wide perception that Germany is overburdened, and that's why you're not in a good position to help or partner African countries on the economic recovery journey, given your own challenges, unique challenges that you're facing as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war. The Nord Stream 2 obviously suffered an impact as a result of this conflict. So given this situation, do you share the same view that you're not in a position to help in the economic recovery of some African countries and allies of yours, such as Ghana?
You mentioned the visit of our Minister of Finance, who recently had talks in Ghana, and his message was clearly, yes, we are prepared to help,
Right.
but we are prepared to help only if certain conditions are met. First of all, we insist that those measures that can be taken here in this country have to be taken. The second condition is that yes, we are willing to take our share of responsibility as one of the major bilateral donors to Ghana, but only if all the others also join in this effort. And there is a multilateral framework that was set up exactly for these kind of crises, and we urge and try to convince all stakeholders in this process to stick to this agreed framework. It's the G20 common framework.
But that framework, I'm afraid, Mr. Ambassador, is facing some setback, especially on the part of China. Our president was very categorical in that statement when he engaged the finance minister from your country. He's asking for the help of Germany to navigate that hurdle with China when it comes to the Paris Club. Practically, what's your country going to do in that regard to help?
Well, I think we all have to try to convince China also to take its share in this process. China is the largest bilateral donor to Ghana, so China has to be part of the solution. Now, Ghana has its means to convince China to do that. We, Germany, will also use our channels to convince that it is in our common interest that we all agree on a way forward, including in the interests of China. So this is the only way we can try to get China to the table. Your president is rightly referring to the case of Zambia, where it took very, very long until China in the end agreed to come to the table. We hope that this time, with a concerted effort, we might be capable of convincing China to shorten this process, because time is of the essence in the case of Ghana.
When you were speaking, you talked about some internal mechanisms that as a country we could deploy as our side of the bargain, just to complement your efforts from the international community. And looking back, looking at the country where we were rising economically and now there's a downturn, how do you feel we could be fulfilling our side of the bargain as part of the internal conditions you feel we could be meeting?
Let me point to three elements.
Right.
The biggest loss maker in Ghana is the energy sector. In this sector alone, each year 1.5 billion new debt is piled up.
Wow.
So if that is not solved, then you can ask the IMF for 10 billion. You still will not solve the problem in the medium term. So there has to be an answer in Ghana to the 50% technical and non-technical losses in the energy sector. If that is not resolved, I don't see how we can find a sustainable solution for the financial problems of the country. The second part is on the other side of the budget, and that is the revenues. Ghana has one of the lowest tax to GDP ratios, not even 13%. So we have been cooperating with the local authorities and setting up a very smart system of property tax collection. So I think that is an important way forward, and this has to be done, and processes and decision making has to be faster to meet the goals, to be able to meet the targets that have been agreed with the IMF. And the third point I want to raise is that I'm still amazed on the procedures for how the budget is set up, and how difficult it is to get an understanding of how this all works. And I think that is something that has to be approved. And again, we are offering support in this field. And I'm confident that if there is enough political will, very, very important decisions can be taken. And don't forget, I mean, crises are very hard for people. People are suffering, families are suffering. But don't forget that normally crises also offer opportunities. We from Europe know that the European integration process, we only advanced in times of crisis, because that's when people stop arguing about nitty-gritty, but really focus on the essential, and then agree on the important steps.
Well, it's not as though we're not trying as a continent. We're taking a giant step under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which you were talking about. But looking at how advanced the European Union is, there's the fear as to whether or not Africa would meet that test. So far, 8 countries, instead of the 54 that we're expecting would jump onto the agreement and start trade as of last year. That did not happen. Do you feel that we're technically fit as a continent to run that program?
Of course, Africa can and must progress is in the way. I mean, let's take the example of interconnectivity. I mean, it is very difficult to understand why it takes you. Why do I have to fly to Europe to fly to Namibia, for example, from Ghana? You know, this. So there are many fields where the continent has a lot potential. I cannot understand. I understand why certain things do not progress, because there are people who have vested interest that there will be no change. But economically, I mean, of course, it's not very helpful and healthy for the countries and for the continent that so much time and energy is wasted at the borders. I mean, if you travel to the border between Ghana and Burkina Faso and you see the trucks sitting there for weeks, what economic reason is usefulness is in that? Right. So I think that's something that has to be solved, and so all the red tape has to disappear. So it's African Continental Free Trade Area is an important step, but it is not the only step that has to be taken. There are other steps that are at least as important.
Very often, our government and many governments across Africa have pointed to COVID-19 as one of the major factors that blew a lot of plans off the table. Now we're building back resilience, and as part of that plan, for a country such as Ghana, we've decided to, of course, work with our international partners, including Germany, in trying to manufacture our own vaccines. Vaccines have proven to be an effective way of checking the pandemic and also creating that platform for us to build resilience against any other pandemic in the future. Just a couple of days ago, the Parliament of Ghana passed that bill that would allow us to manufacture our own vaccine. And I understand that the German government is making some pledges to the Republic of Ghana. Since you're here, Mr. Ambassador, what's going to be the level of support from the German government towards that campaign?
Thank you. I think the COVID pandemic made it so obvious how vulnerable we all are. Europeans, Americans, Africans, and that having a competence in vaccine production is key for resilience of the continent against these kind of diseases and pandemics. And my government strongly believes that this has to be, we have to support this. It cannot be that the African countries have to wait until other countries have have served their needs, and then the leftovers are then shipped to Africa. So I think that is absolutely legitimate request, and so from the very beginning, when your president made this ambitious plan to try to set up a private sector-driven vaccine production process, we said we are happy to support, and we did that from the very beginning. We supported with consultancy the setup of the vaccine commission. We offered support and consultancy for the setup of the 10-year plan. This is something that has to be stressed. Vaccine production is a very complex process. It's not an easy one. So it's very complex, and very many fields have to be involved. So to believe that tomorrow we will have vaccine production all over Africa would be a little bit naive. Right. So, and this is why I think this plan that was set up, the roadmap, is so important. And the roadmap has the aim of setting up a vaccine production capacity within 10 years.
Okay, so the target is 10 years.
This is the timeline, and that is a realistic timeline. Okay. So
it's not as though once we get this bill running, once we get this law running, the next minute we're having vaccine production going on.
And it's because of the complexity of the process. Right. And I think that this government took and the private consortium who is ready to invest took the right decision to start with the end of the process, which is the fill and finishing. Now, fill and finishing sounds like, I just fill and finish and sell it. But again, it is a very complex challenge. Just to give you an idea, that the most important thing is if you want to build a business case, you must be able to sell this vaccine, not only in Ghana, but also in other countries. Right. So you need an agency that is competent and respected for certifying this production. Now, this is at least the BioNTech vaccine is a very complex vaccine, and so complex is the certification of the quality of the product. Only to have this certification process under control, you are looking for at least 200 people who must be trained over time and build up capacity. This is where we are focusing right now, to empower the Food and Drug Authority. We do that jointly with the European Union, and we have committed important funds to that aim to increase the capacity, the competence of this institution. It is a very prestigious institute. It is it's top ranked in Africa, so they start from a very high level, and it needs a little on top to be added.
Okay, let's talk about the modalities. How much, first of all, are you committing to this project? Do we know any amounts that you're
we have for the time 21 to 24 committed 5 million.
Okay.
Plus we have the European Union who co-finances 2.5 million. And in the most recent government-to-government negotiations in Berlin, Germany promised to consider to continue this type of cooperation after 24.
Beyond that, are we likely to see experts from Germany coming to the country? And how do you intend to support in terms of the technical aspect?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there are not so many experts around the world who have the expertise. So Ghanaian experts will go to Germany, will go to other countries in Europe and America, and we will help to help that experts from Germany and other countries come to Ghana to support the relevant institutions in this process.
I recall that in February last year, in that joint statement with the government of Ghana, the EU and the German government, it was clear and evident that the COVID pandemic has had some effects on the economy as well. Under this support for the vaccine program, are we likely to see an economic module attached to this? Because the feeling is eventually if you're immunizing the people, you also have to empower them.
I don't know if I really understand your question.
Yeah, the direct bearing of what's going to happen now under the vaccine production process, and how we can, of course, get some immense benefit out of it onto our economy. Are there going to be job opportunities? Are there also going to be some plans attached onto this program that will help Ghana's economic recovery?
Okay, yeah, I think this process offers tremendous opportunities for young, well trained and educated Ghanaians to really find jobs, high-paying jobs in very qualified industries, as the pharmaceutical industry. That is, I think, very exciting. Now, this capacity building with the Food and Drug Authority is, of course, something that will also trickle down into other sectors and enable other industries to start producing in Ghana with the potential to export. And there again you need this certifying institution, which you will have after this training has been completed. I want also to point to the fact we also have this very important cooperation among the KCCR in Kumasi and the Bernhard Nocht Institute in my hometown Hamburg. They are cooperating since 30 years, and they are currently starting to investigate in the very beginning of the vaccine development, and so we are seeing institutions from both ends to start, and there again brilliant opportunities for young Ghanaian researchers.
So is this research? Or
that's research, yeah. That's research and development of vaccines, and so to develop the vaccine, you have to identify who causes the disease. Then only then are you capable of doing. So that part is done in Kumasi in this very, very exciting cooperation.
That sounds amazing. We were just talking about the recent high-level visits that we're experiencing. Yes. What's behind it?
Well, it's the visit of the Minister of Finance was, of course, related to the situation in West Africa. German troops are still trying to support the government in Mali in its fight against jihadist terrorist groups and criminal organizations. This is the largest German engagement outside NATO territory. That, of course, also has enormous financial implications. So I think Minister of Finance is well advised to, especially if this is mandated by the German Parliament. So I think that it was very, very crucial that he himself has a chance to get his first view. And then being in the region, of course, Ghana was a natural second choice, given the challenges ahead and given the upcoming decision making in the board of the International Monetary Fund, where Germany is a member. And so I think it was wise to come here and get a first-hand impression on the status and on the decision makers here in the country.
And then we had the MPs from Germany also arriving. We'll talk about their visit shortly, but since you're pointing out issues about security, I recall late last year the German government indicated its commitment towards the Accra initiative, where the president was there, of course an initiative within some African countries to deal with the rise in extremism and a decline in democracy across the sub-region. First of all, what's your reflection on what's accounting for this decline in democracy across West Africa particularly?
Well, I'm not an expert in West Africa, right. But from my what I observe is that the root cause, I think, is a lack of that the democratic elected government at the end did not deliver to the needs of the people, and so that is, I think, at the beginning of all the trouble. So if governments are not focusing on the needs of the population, then you cannot expect that people full-heartedly support the democratic cause. And I think that is something that has to be reflected. And I think also a second dimension is the fact that all these countries have a very young population, and they are ambitious, and they want to see progress, and they haven't seen any progress, and this is what makes people impatient, and so they look for other options.
But under the Accra initiative, for instance, do you feel that we'll be able to foil the threats? Because there are some relatively stable democracies such as Ghana that would want to protect. Do you feel that the Accra initiative would work?
Well, I think the Accra initiative, I think they started in 2017, and was the initial idea was the exchange of critical security relevant information. And I think over the time they have come quite a long way. Even in my home country, the cooperation among security agencies is a very tricky thing. So I have some sympathy for the fact that it takes time. So I think that is good, and it's important that these structures exist. Now we had this conference, and there were certain expectations raised. I have certain difficulties in seeing that. Since then, all these commitments have been delivered. I just have been up in Tamale recently, where Ghana has started to set up what should become the regional headquarters for the joint Accra Initiative forces. But as we all know, Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea are currently looking in other directions. So unless these kind of differences in views is resolved, then I'm afraid it will be very difficult to meet the targets of the 10,000 troops they want to designate to the counterterrorism task force.
Right. And then the visit, the recent one of some German parliamentarians who are in the country. The Speaker of Parliament yesterday indicated that they will be around, study parliamentary procedure, and also particularly deal with the legal affairs side of our parliament. What's the interest of these German MPs in that aspect of our democratic development?
Yeah, it's a very important delegation from with the 8 German members of parliament, representing all parties present in the Bundestag, in the German parliament, eight parliamentarians of all the parties, so from the governing ruling party and the opposition party. As the chairperson of the committee put it, for them the state of law and rule of law and the judicial system, including corrections facilities and so on, the entire complex of judiciary is absolutely relevant if you try to become an attractive destination for foreign direct investment. So they clearly see their visit directly related to the prospects of development in the country. So they engaged in a dialogue with all relevant stakeholders in this field, and so that's what they want to understand. That includes the question of access to justice, human rights for all, illicit financial flows, and these kind of things.
Let's wrap up by looking at the future. Of course, you are here in Ghana. You've been here for a while. You've run some programs, and there are more in the pipeline. What's in the pipeline, if I may just pry into your privacy a bit, and what's coming in as part of the German-Ghanaian cooperation?
Well, what is coming up is on Monday we have the next high-level delegation from Germany coming.
So there's more coming.
Yes, they are around the corner already. Right. So we are expecting the visit of our Minister for Labour and Social Affairs, jointly with our Minister for Development and Cooperation. And to make it even more complex, the Director General of the International Labour Organization will join, and they will tour Ghana. This is related to the development of value chains, and as you might be aware that in Germany and in Europe there are legislation in the making regarding due diligence in supply chains, and they want to have a chance to talk to the private sector and to governmental institutions on how the effects of these laws, and how these laws might have a positive effect on fair labor.
So that's what they will be doing. Beyond that, are there other programs that you'll be running in the coming days? Or
well, this is the immediate future.
Or probably something that you're running that you'd want the public to know about.
Yeah, there is. They will have a very close look on value chain development in the textile sector. So they might, at the end, come to the conclusion that in that field that there might be some interesting new opportunities for cooperation. We just had our government-to-government consultations in November, where we outlined our fields of cooperation in the field of good governance, of green energy, and investment for jobs, and we will continue in these lines. I personally am very excited about Ghana's potential in the field of green hydrogen production. I still hope that we might be able to develop some more cooperation in this field. We have a very interesting greenfield project, pilot project in north of Kumasi in the area of waste to energy. That is now in the test phase, but I think the data shows that this is a very, very promising field, and could be something that could be very interesting for other communities in the country. So that is something we will work a lot on. We will have a look on how we can support, especially in the northern part of the country, the resilience in communities in the rural areas with regard to developments in your neighboring countries. So these are some bits and pieces on ideas and future projects.
Ambassador, we have to go. What's your final message to the people of Ghana?
My final message is it's a severe crisis, but let's all work on taking advantage of the chances we can see and the opportunities in the crisis.
Ambassador Daniel Crowe, thank you for talking to JoyNews. I'm grateful.